have a look at the sales figures and tell me what you see is integral to its whole rigidity. We thought, let's see if we can push this design a little further. It was polarizing, but did it work is what you're asking. Well guys, here we are again. I bought my special shirt for this one because this is a premium SUV. And we're going to have a look at the Evoque, specifically the Evoque Convertible and what happened there. This was around 20 years ago. Rewind the clock a little bit. And if we rewind it a little bit more, we can see that when Ford took over in 2000, a lot of stuff happened at Land Rover. It was a busy time. The models were coming thick and fast. We had the Disco 3. We had the Range Rover Sport. The L322 made its appearance. The Freelander 2 had come out. And Land Rover was on a high. I thought, well, guys, we're going to push it to the next level. We're going to the premium compact 4x4 SUV segment. Basically, the L322 landed, which was just a phenomenal step up from the P38 before. It was developed by BMW as well. Quality was there, the whole thing. It had notched it up into the next segment, basically even more luxury. For the mid-class, we had the Disco 3 now, which was a totally different design language to the Disco 2. Everything had evolved, moved forward. Very successful model as well. We had the Range Rover Sport. For me, I call it the gangster model, the L320. Very angular, very capable, sporty. It really pushed the Range Rover into the sports sector as well as luxury. And then we had the Freelander 2, which landed. Very square styling as well, which is basically under Ford, which Range Rover was becoming. By 2008, things were not looking so good under Ford. Basically, there was a huge recession that hit. I don't know if you remember that. I certainly do. That was the exact day the exact year we bought our house, right at the wrong time. So at that time, Ford had to sell because they had to focus on their core market, which was the US really, and the Premier Automotive Group, the PAG, had to go. So they had to shift. Aston Martin, Volvo had to go. Land Rover was sold to Tata for a very big check, which involved 9 zeros. And basically from that moment on, Tata bought Land Rover and said, guys, and Jaguar, you do what you need to do. Here's the money. We trust you guys. We're not going to meddle, which was exactly what they needed to do. So at this time, the LRX was in development, started under Ford, obviously, as a design exercise to move the Range Rover into the next level of design. It landed in the motor show. Basically, at a motor show, you're doing a couple of things with your concept cars. You're showcasing your abilities, your design for the future, your engineering. You're keeping the eyes focused on your brand, but you're also testing the water for ideas. And if it lands well at the motor show, normally you can push it through the board to give you some money to develop the whole process and get this thing into production. And the LRX was something phenomenal, very different to what people were used to. It had a few design elements from Range Rover, clamshell bonnet, floating roof, but everything else was different. Reductive styling, very rounded. The belt line, basically, the waistline, rising up at the rear. The roof line came down. The glass house was very small, much less so than Range Rovers were supposed to be. It was a totally different idea, totally different direction. And Range Rover was testing the water. What can we do here? And the result was phenomenal. Everybody loved it. The concept car just took off. People were on board. And the board was on board too. And they said, let's go for it. So they took about 3 years to develop it. And in 2011, the Evoque landed. 3-door and 5-door. The engines came from the Freelander. The basic chassis underneath was also based on the Freelander, which was based on the EUCD base, which basically came from Ford, which underpinned a lot of Fords and basically the whole of the Volvo range at that time. But it was adapted to Range Rover use. They did do a lot of modifications, like the wheelbase, everything, to make it work for them. But the basic underpinnings were, I think it was a Haldex 4x4 system. They even had 2-wheel drive, yes, in a Land Rover. And basically the design of the Evoque was unchanged from the LRX concept, which is also very unusual. This hardly ever happens. Normally there's a lot of bean counters involved, a lot of legislation involved, safety on all of this stuff, which makes your design evolve into something else. This was basically the LRX, and it landed on the showroom floor. This obviously helped the sales just go through the roof, along with all the other tech stuff, because Land Rover is pretty good at launching new models, new segments, but they also come with new technology, like, for instance, hill descent control, terrain response, all of that stuff. Those were original Land Rover ideas that they brought out, and people just started using them and copying them, but Land Rover came first. By the way, this was about 10 years ago. Sat-nav was an option back in the day. If you had the base model, you didn't get sat-nav on your car. Things have changed a lot since then. So anyway, Evoque, fantastic design. It was aimed at the urban-centric, younger individual, and they were trying to broaden the market. And they were also trying to go after the conquest sales. Conquest sales meaning new people to the brand. So it was a sub-Range Rover L322 model, compact sector, things like the X3, the GLK, the Q3, the Q5, those kind of things. Premium, but still capable. And that's the one little double oxymoron I have with Range Rover especially, is when your cars can go off-road, but now they're so premium, you would never go off-road with them. However, that was Land Rover's pièce de résistance. That was their raison d'être, as they call it. It has to be capable, and the Evoque, no compromises. This is going to work as well or better than the Freelander 2. So the reception was just fantastic. They did 500,000 in the first 4 years, which is just unheard of. It was their best-selling model ever. Things were going really well. So in 2012, they thought, let's see if we can push this design a little further by cutting the roof off. And landed at the motor show, convertible, 4x4, premium SUV, and specifically luxury as well. They tested the waters there, obviously, with their concept. Very warm response. People were on board with the idea. It looked fantastic. This was pushing the subcompact luxury sector into the next level even, basically, because a convertible, that's what it is, was also unheard of. How do you make a 4x4 and cut the roof off? Well, let me let you in on a secret. Have you heard of the Series 1? Basically, that's what the Series 1 was. It had a windscreen and nothing else. And basically, you could have a tarpaulin over the top if it was raining. So this wasn't exactly new, but in the premium sector, it was very new. And no other car manufacturer had done this before. And what they did, they had to do a lot of changes. Obviously, you can't just take a hacksaw to it like you can with a 127. This needed strengthening, because if you know about car design, if you're a bit of an anorak, you'd understand that the roof of a car is integral to its whole rigidity. It absorbs the twist and the flex, and the whole frame, as it were, is one integral unit. It's designed that way, basically, to try to take up the stresses and twisting motions. If you cut the roof off, suddenly you've got a lot of bend, you've got flex, twist, all of that stuff going. If you're cornering, if you're climbing a curb, if you're going over a speed hump, especially if you're going off-road, now you've got these off-camber tracks. How do you keep your car so rigid? Well, you just add more steel into it. That's basically how they attacked this one. And what that meant was, in the door sills, put a lot of steel bracing there. Also the windscreen and the A-pillars, a lot of rigidity there to stop the flex, because now your roof's gone. And basically they added a lot of weight into the car. If you read the blurb on the Range Rover site, it's very well worded about weight saving and all of this, but basically they added 270 kilos into the car. It's basically putting 3 or 4 people in the car with you. This obviously didn't help with the performance. They had the 2-liter petrol version from the Evoque, 240 horsepower, pretty good, but still you're lugging a lot of extra weight around. The other side of it is the packaging. The because now the rear seat is much narrower because of the roof mechanism, which was built by Webasto. Obviously it was a flexible roof that had to go somewhere, that had to go into the boot. You could do it a different way by leaving it on the back, let's say like a VW Beetle. The convertible cover sits on the car. In this case, they wanted it below the belt line, totally gone. So when it's closed up, I mean, when the roof is open, the clamshell closes on it, and it's a totally clean design. This means you lose a lot of boot space, obviously. I mean, the roof has to go somewhere. What I ended up with was 250 liters of boots, which is basically, correct me if I'm wrong, about the same as a Smart, which is ridiculous. This, along with the extra heavy weight and the price tag, which was edging up to $50,000, put a lot of people off. It was polarizing. A lot of people were on board because it was a new fashion statement. It did land very well in places like southern France, California, Hong Kong, all of the big names. But a lot of people were like, you know what, I can't really use it. Basically, there's no luggage space. If there's 4 of us in there, we can't all take bags with us. All of this stuff didn't really land very well. It launched in 2016, in production for 3 years, roughly, till 2019, when the new facelifted Evoque came out. They pushed out the door about 10,000 units, which was hardly a footnote in the Evoque's already 800,000 units since 2011. So it didn't really make sense on the bottom line. You could argue it was a bit of a halo move, a bit of a halo car, also to showcase their capabilities, as in, we can make our car work even without the roof. We're still better off-road than you are, kind of thing. It didn't last very long. Obviously, the new Evoque came out in 2018, 2019. Basically a refreshed version on a new platform as well, an evolution of the platform. Now we had even more reductive styling, flush door handles, even more sleek. But the convertible wasn't part of that conversation. It was quietly shuffled into the background and forgotten in a way. So I could argue it was a bit of hubris involved here, where it was a case of, look at us, we can do anything. There was also, the money was there now, so let's use it. Let's see how far we can push the brand. It did make a lasting statement, I suppose, on the brand itself, premium brand. What the Evoque did was push the design language across the whole board now, which basically means reductive styling, and that has influenced everything. The Velar came out in 2015, super slick. Obviously the new Range Rovers, even the Defender has now leaned into that as well. So the Evoque was probably the start of all of this new design language. And a lot of people, traditionalists, don't enjoy it, they don't like it. However, have a look at the sales figures and tell me what you see, because Land Rover, Range Rover is doing phenomenal things. Each new version that came out has already been a sales success, even the Discovery 5, which was also quite polarizing. It's also a lesson in how testing the waters sometimes doesn't work out very well, because the concept car was well received. There was a lot of hype and buzz around it. By the time it hit the showroom floor, the floors, basically the extra weight, the price tag, there's no luggage space, that kind of did play a big role, that the styling and the tech didn't really help to overcome. I think I said that right, something to that effect. So yeah, a little quirky one here. The history's so broad. I mean, you can pick any subject and Land Rover is part of it in some way. So there you go, guys. A quick look at the Evoque Convertible specifically, which is a strange one. Strange little segue into a place it might not have needed to go. There you go, guys. If you want some more Land Rover stuff, here's the link up there as usual. Links to the books are down below if you want to read a bit more about Land Rover history, covering all of it, including this section. And the rabbit hole goes deep. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one, and keep rolling.